Yankee. Of all days, it's Monday, April 1st. That would be April Fool's Day, 2024, year of the Lord. So I got a bunch of things to go through, but let's start with the calls to action here. First of all, go to Yankee T News, like, subscribe, donate, buy our stuff, and tell everybody. And don't forget, good old Sally Fink, TheCCLTribune.com, ContinentalTribune.com. Like, donate, share, and tell the universe. Meantime, Bob McGuffey is still in the fight for the nomination for Congress for the Republican Party. So I want to put this up again and remind you, whatever you can do to donate to his campaign, by all means, please do. Now, the theme for today is, if the truth was on your side, you wouldn't have to lie. So I'm just saying. Now, the other part I want to dwell on just a little bit before I get started. Eric put this in my hands at the last minute. So, this is part of a much larger problem, but small within the confines of Greenwich. Proposed Greenwich Tree Ordinance Amendment reveals intentions to chip away at personal property rights. So, basically, 20 citizens, we don't know who they are, put together a proposal for a group, a tree commission, that will be responsible for making sure that trees are managed properly on everybody's property. Well, my first question is, who are these 20 citizens? Why did they do this? Why do they do this now? We don't know, but it is very clear that they intend to have policing powers to punish and fine people if they don't take care of their trees according to the whims of this commission, the Tree Commission. Well, there's an opportunity to tell members of the RTN that we do not want this, so you might want to speak up. So there's that. Meantime, it's not nice to call this a quickie, but I'm not going to dwell on it as long as I'd like to. There's an article about how children's suicides in Connecticut are rising. And the data point in particular is that they cited for the time period from January 2016 to September 2022, for children between the ages of 10 and 17, that there were 48 suicides by children. Now, ramming cars into structures is one preferred method, apparently. This was all put together by a panel at the Yale Pediatric Emergency Department. Nonetheless, given their status, I have a few questions. Okay, what about the families? Were there clusters? Was there any kind of pattern other than age here? Is there a gender breakdown? Is there a racial breakdown to consider? An ethnic breakdown? I don't address any of this, but of course the person who wrote the article couldn't help herself and had to throw in a little editorializing by suggesting that our behavioral health system is collapsing. Okay, we've had a big to-do, ma'am, about these mental health facilities being set up in school systems all around the state. Maybe there's a hidden story behind this, but the push to set these things up, to get, quote, professionals in place, et cetera, would seem to put the lie to the notion that this system is collapsing. And the other lie is that it's the, how do I want to put this? The ability to prevent suicides depends upon this behavioral health system. Well, I question that too. And I want to point out that there's a fatal flaw in the name, behavioral, okay? It's more than behavior that leads to a suicidal state. And this is part of an old saw in psychology. I'm not going to get into it. But there you go. And then just to mention it, for kids aged 18 to 21, also in about a year and a half period, there were another 71 suicides. In New Haven, there were 223 attempted suicides. So this is not to say that there isn't a problem. There clearly is. But this article certainly gives me the feeling that they're collecting statistics and they're not really making the effort to understand the underlying causes. Just my opinion. Meantime, with respect to education, also, there was this article. You see, charter schools are in demand in the state. As an aside, I'm just going to mention that the Guilford Public School System in the last couple of years has lost 313 students. Enrollment has declined by that amount. Where did these kids go? Well, I think they went to, I'm going to say it, better schools. In the meantime, though, and a lot are going to homeschooling, and some are going to charter schools. So the unions, the teachers' unions, don't like these charter schools, and the fight continues. And I think what we're finding here is that the teachers' unions are apparently causing these delays in the funding of charter schools, and this article was about students asking for that money for those charter schools. Yeah, this stuff just amazes me. Okay, so just also quick passage. There's something called the Trevor Project, and it's in support of, I'll just say nicely, alternative lifestyles. And in California, there's at least one school system that took the Trevor Project down. I don't know what the story is here in Stanford and Greenwich. Now, the other part is that we're waiting. That's right, we're waiting because good old Joe Biden, that's Traitor Biden, has been asked to show up and testify about his family's business in front of Congress. We'll see how long he drags it out. We'll see how long he can put it off. All right. I'm eager to hear what he has to say, even if I already know. The other part, ladies and gentlemen, okay, remember the Francis Scott Key Bridge accident and all the things that happened. Now, one of the points that has not been explored adequately was a mere couple of days later, a similar incident took place on a bridge over the Arkansas River in Oklahoma. Now, the problem I'm having is you had a similar incident. It wasn't nearly as devastating, but the way it unfolded was almost identical to what happened in Baltimore. So there's an inherent suspicion that something is going on. I just need to point out that when 9/11 happened, when the first airplane hit the first tower, people are like, what was that? But when the second airplane hit the second tower, then we knew we were under attack. Okay, so here now we have a second attack on a bridge, similar to the first. Even though it's in a different part of the country and a different impact, it should give you reason to wonder just what is going on. Now, the other part that's very strange, I mean, I put up the link for it so you can go check it out. Supposedly, repair work on the bridge or removal stopped when they, quote, discovered a high-pressure natural gas pipe at the bottom of the bay that ran along where the bridge is. I'm not sure I believe them. It's the people who are responsible for this should know that it was there. As soon as they suddenly discover it and they had no idea, that's ridiculous. Okay, let me move on now to the Connecticut Economy Report. So here we had somebody coming out saying that the state of Connecticut has seen the economy grow, in 2023 on par with the rest of the country. Well, as I have reported before, job creation is not on par with the rest of the country. All you have to do is a simple analysis to see that. But of course, the people in the press who are sycophants don't want to look at that. And the other part of the problem is that they have a tendency to revise these numbers later on, and they have a tendency to revise them downward. I reported on this about a year and a half ago when we had labor statistics for Connecticut that were not exactly correct, and you found that the people who put it out had to backtrack because the numbers were too high. So here we're saying that the economy for Connecticut grew at a pace commensurate with the rest of the United States. I will be expecting a revision downward in a few months because you cannot have lower than expected job growth and higher than expected economic growth. They kind of tend to not go together, okay? Now, really annoying, as we know, with respect to the so-called Easter party that was held at the White House on Sunday, children who wanted to bring religious-themed Easter art were banned. Plus, we had Gender Visibility Day, Transgender Visibility Day. The entirely incoherent setup here, where on the one hand you're trashing Christianity, refusing to have expressions of Christianity, and then on the other hand talking about transgender visibility. The word hypocrite comes to mind. Phony would be another. So I think we have to learn that, as Steve Bannon has pointed out, we're looking at a cult, right? Transgenderism is a cult that's supposed to replace Christianity. And the way they try to do it is in a sort of feel-good depiction of Jesus that does not accord with our understanding. Just saying, okay? Meantime, I just want to jump to this next thing here. All right, I think I mentioned it last week. In Hartford, there's an ongoing citizens patrol to reduce crime in a North End neighborhood of Hartford. This has been put together by two people, Cornell Lewis, who's the organizer, and Archbishop Burke, I believe is his last name. And they have been criticized, but they're doing absolutely the right thing. And I just want to point out that it's the mayor and this silly so-called anti-violence group that's criticizing them. My comment to the two of them is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to reduce crime in Hartford? I think this is particularly embarrassing for the mayor because his police force has not been able to step up and do the job. So you should be relieved, Mayor, that you're not caught in some embarrassing situation with some nasty crime because you have a citizens group of responsible legal gun owners doing their part to help keep civic order. When you complain, yet you can't do anything about it. I think it's a ridiculous situation. So good for Mr. Lewis and good for Archbishop Burke. Meantime, the other thing is we put up a link here. It's a YouTube video, about 15 minutes, that is a review of the Dominion cases. Now, as we know, using Fox News as sort of the point of departure, if you will, that you had Dominion suing people left and right for suggesting that they were somehow responsible for cheating in the election of 2020. Okay. The only problem is that there was evidence in that case that still remains unresolved to this day. Let's just deal with one. Oh, there are no modems in here. Now, by the way, when they replayed the testimony of I'm guessing it was the CEO for Dominion, it was clear that he was equivocating a little bit here and there about the presence of modems, maybe only modems of a certain kind, just for local area networks, nothing more, nothing else here to see. Oh, yeah. Well, meantime, two other elements of testimony that came out were workers for Dominion who were in the country of Serbia, for which emails were produced, where they're discussing among themselves how to run tests for the machines in Colorado. Excuse me? How come people in Serbia are involved in our election equipment in Colorado? No explanation. And by the same token, there was a discussion among other workers with respect to the election machines in Alaska, where they had networked modems, where they were making sure that they could share information with each other. So this pretty much puts the lie to what Dominion has been doing, but there's no accountability, no justice, and I guess we're just going to have to keep working on it. Meantime, President Trump, all right, Alan, hey, so the other part here that I need to share with you is that President Trump is contemplating a second motion for recusal of Judge Marchand in the hush money case in New York City. Because it turns out that Judge Marchand has a daughter who runs an organization called Authentic Campaigns. And they've been raising money from Democrat donors on the basis of the case that is before Judge Marchand. Okay, we have a very obvious conflict of interest But again, I've seen this so many times. The judges themselves have no clues to what conflict of interest really is. So he says, "I don't know what you're talking about," and then he rejects the motion. Okay, well, we're going to try it again and see. So stay tuned. Meantime, see, there's a pattern here, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't have enough time to get into it, but I'm just going to say that there is clearly this creeping tyranny that's finding its way into different aspects of our lives. This story that I'm about to mention is very much a part of that. So the title I chose was Stealth Tyranny for Truckers. The Department of Transportation has been trying to institute these Orwellian regulations that constitute surveilling truckers, and it really shouldn't be happening. There's a particular legal group that's been constantly FOIAing for information, and the Department of Transportation and others drag their feet. They're in no hurry to produce the information, and what they do produce is heavily redacted. So there's clearly something wrong here, okay? And it's the kind of thing where a lot of people, including members of the audience, are going to have to stay on this, because we can't let them get away with this kind of stuff. It's just unreal. Anyway, now the next story. See, I've got two opinions on this. So it's the I think the publication is Game of India, but others have grabbed this too. The story focuses on how Big Pharma uses Ukrainians as guinea pigs for clinical trials. Okay, fair enough. This has been part of a larger series of stories that we've heard that make Ukraine sort of a special case. But if it's about clinical trials, if it's about drugs and testing them for safety and efficacy, Ukraine is not the only one, all right? You have many countries where clinical trials are being done on an international basis. If anything, I would point to the cases where clear fraud has been committed. So I'm talking about when Fauci took those poor black orphans in Harlem and used them to test AIDS drugs back in the 80s and 90s. I would be pointing to the HIV clinical trials that were done in Africa. Okay, a lot of those people, they didn't care what happened to them. So under less than stringent circumstances, they would have given them very dangerous drugs in order to see what would happen. It's more important that these people they don't care about and they don't think are important to suffer the consequences than people in our own country. And of course, the big one is, India. So when the well-meaning Bill Gates went to India to do trials on the polio vaccine, and an untold number of kids were killed or harmed for life as a result, who cared? I mean, the good news is that the government of India understood what Bill Gates had done, and they banished him from the country for life. Don't you ever come back with your so-called polio vaccine again. So it's examples like those that I think are more pertinent than simply setting up trials in any given country. Okay, and also I should point out, if you go and read, I think it was this article, but it lists examples of trials in other countries as well. So it really is an international exercise. Meantime, this really gets under my skin, all right? Here on the one hand, I'm talking about how there really are these things called clinical trials that go on around the world. You really shouldn't be upset about it. But then on the other hand, we remember the Chinese bioweapons laboratory that was discovered back in March in California. The first problem was that the CDC and others knew about this lab at least 5 months prior to when it was released to the public. Okay, what's that all about? Why did all that time have to pass as far as that's concerned? And the other question here is, even if this company, which apparently was set up in Las Vegas and other places, and then for various reasons ended up in this small town in California, there had to be connections. I mean, let me just state the obvious. So you have the company, you have its corporate organization. So you have certain people, the officers. Who are those so-called officers connected to? right? You had, for example, an accountant who was one of the LLC officers. Well, who did he know? Nobody bothered to look at those. And I will just give you my suspicion, okay, that there's more to this story than we're going to be hearing about for quite some time. So to those who continue to dig into it, keep going, and we'll be faithfully reporting what you find. Okay, and then the last thing, our continued coverage of January 6th. So Julie Kelly pointed out that the people who have been a member of the so-called J6 committee continue to not cooperate by the others, but the Republicans. The real Republicans are doing the investigation. They refuse to produce transcripts and other documents that are needed in order to sort out what really happened. So in one respect, we'll just have to keep on digging without the benefit of their non-cooperation. And I trust that at some point, some other piece of truth will come up. I mean, this is what we're seeing over time. And as the guys dig in, they find something else, and hopefully the dots will get connected at some point. So those are the big things tonight. And we're going to be at this again next week. Look for our newsletter I'll be putting out. We're going to have other follow-up and the short pieces we're going to be doing. So guys, thanks a lot. We'll get 1 million audience yet. So what'd you think?